I'm going to start and make this a little bit interactive, and I'm going to say a statement, and I'd like to see a show of hands if you agree with the statement. So it's really straightforward. We'll start with a test run to make sure everyone's awake. So 1 + 1 = 2. Okay, so I think most people got that. Some people needed a few seconds to load Mathematica, but I think generally got a good response. So here's another one. Education is the most powerful weapon with which you can use to change the world, Mandela. Okay, so this is the right audience for that kind of stuff. Most people agree. And because we're talking broadly about computing-based math, about generally digitization of education, or edtech, the edtech revolution, and as you guys would have all seen, there's this massive revolution. VC investments in edtech are up 30 times in the last 8 or 9 years. The next statement is, educational technology, or edtech, will transform global education. This is interesting. So we're around half or slightly more. And so that viewpoint is based sort of around this cartoon. So you have a kid, he has access to a wealth of information on the internet that didn't exist 10 years ago. Let's take the most basic example, so non-math based. Anyone here over 30, like myself, will remember that we had to pay thousands to get encyclopedias on the shelves when we were kids, or go to the library, just so we could have access to knowledge. Now it's on the internet, it's free, it's much bigger, it's easier to search, and we kind of take it for granted that we can do that. And we can see all kinds of other information and learn anything we want, basically for free. And so the statement a second ago, I'm going to go ahead and disagree with that statement, because this statement only makes sense if this is what it looks like for every kid in the world. In actuality, this is kind of more what it looks like today, is that 9 out of 10 kids actually don't have access to, frankly, anything that anyone's talking about in the edtech revolution. Because to have access to it, you need to have a device, you need to have a connection, and frankly, on top of that, you need to have a system around you of teachers, of curriculums, and so on that encourage that kind of usage of technology. And the reason this is important is because it doesn't just extend across borders, but also within countries. So looking at open educational resources and the potential for them, this is a concept that comes from Justin Reich at the Harvard Grad School of Education. And the utopian vision is that as there's more edtech innovation, learning obviously increases, but it starts to close the gap between affluent and low-income students. This is just within, let's say, the US. Because technology is a great equalizer, and if it's Mathlicious or it's Khan Academy, whatever it is, everyone can start accessing the same sorts of things so long as they have the connection and the device. And that starts to equalize the playing field. But early research he had done with edtech sources looking at rich and lower income schools actually found that the picture looks a bit more like this, which is that the gains of edtech are disproportionately accruing to students in affluent communities. And lower income students, they get some benefit, but it's extremely marginal. And it's marginal because, again, they either don't have access, or perhaps it's the curriculum or it's something pedagogical, but they're not really making use of them in the right way. And so the solution that we came up with was to say that, well, if it's a question of access, and we looked across all of the research and said, well, it's access, but we want kids to be able to use these things at home, and this is whether it's in Aboriginal communities in Canada, which we're working on stuff to do, or in Haiti, or anywhere else, they need to be able to, it has to be intuitive, has to be low cost, has to be very low power usage, and it has to be something they can take with them and use outside of the classroom, right? So we're not supplanting classroom hours, we're actually giving them something they can use on their own time. And so the tablet we developed, which is this, is a $50 device that is extremely intuitive, like all tablets. It's very low power usage. And to get around the question of internet connectivity, we were very pragmatic. We just realized that it's cheaper to add more storage space onto the device and use compression and whatnot and put, frankly, a lot of content on the device. And so we're able to put everything listed there, which are textbooks from CK12, who are here somewhere, videos, quizzes, all kinds of content on it, and add on a layer of gamification. So, for example, we do put games on the device, but the kids can install their own games. We install the games. Most of them are educational. Some of them are, Angry Birds. But they can only play them if they actually do their exercises, and the teachers actually give them codes. And we do this because it empowers the teacher. So instead of a pat on the head or a smiley face, they can give them something something they care about, and they synchronize through Wi-Fi. And we did an early analysis. We found that it's $50 on a device that's content worth over 5,000 if you were to replicate it in traditional formats, so libraries, books on shelves. And we think it's almost inevitable that underprivileged kids will probably find more from going directly, leapfrogging to this kind of a technology. So we're doing trials in Haiti. We're looking at a bunch of other ones in the world for 2014. This graph is actually inaccurate because it doesn't include Canada, where we're based in Toronto. As I mentioned, we're looking at stuff there that will launch next year. And I'll just finish by pointing out something I think is really important in the context of ICT or technology in classrooms, and just say, well, what makes us different? And there's one critical thing that I think is probably the most important of all, is that there have been other attempts at using technology in classrooms for kids, and I would argue that they were technology for the sake of technology. Technology was an end. It was a kid gets a computer, the end. That was kind of the point of it. And we philosophically, having looked at all of the research around it, we became convinced that what really makes a difference is the content that you're delivering. And rather than wasting money on fancy technology, we would rather just build a very, very, very low-cost delivery mechanism to take fantastic content that, frankly, everyone else is creating, people in this room and more broadly speaking, and deliver it to kids who have otherwise no access to anything else. Because we think that if it can change education for kids in affluent communities, it can do far more if we can just find a really low-cost and scalable way to deliver it to less privileged kids. And the other two things that make us different, we're very respectful when we deal in any of these markets around the world. We actually let the local partners choose the content, so we actually have sort of a menu of the available sources, which is far more than you can load onto any one device. And we work with them to choose it, obviously geared towards science and math, which are much more scalable. And finally, we were founded as a nonprofit, even though, as mentioned, I came from a Wall Street background, for the very specific purpose that we wanted to welcome in people who wanted to be part of something, part of a movement to find a new model of affordable access to education without having any worries about where our incentives are or anything else, and to know that the key is really just on impact. So that's it.